Thank you. Ben, let's come back to you then and tell us, what is the conduit?
That's a very good question. I'd like to know exactly what the conduit is. I've got some thoughts on it based on my analysis and going down there and having a look around, which I'm going to share with you. But it sits right in the nexus of this public-private partnership, this big global web of interconnected organizations, whether it relates to climate change or any of the other policies being pushed by places like the World Economic Forum. So it's a private members club. It's based in London's Covent Garden. They've also got an outpost in Oslo. They talk about gathering changemakers. Yes, it's a progressive institution. They describe themselves as a diverse and dynamic community of like-minded individuals united by a shared vision of creating a more sustainable, equitable and just future. Again, all of those neo-Marxist buzzwords right on their website. It was established in 2018 by these three gentlemen: Nick Hamilton, who's a former investment banker, and he also, at around the same time, founded Conduit Capital Partners, which is an impact investment manager based at the club, at the same address in Covent Garden. The other founder was Rowan Finnegan, the founder of Regenerative Group, a purpose-driven investment fund focused on systems change for the creation of a more sustainable world. He's on the right-hand side there. And the third partner was Paul Van Zyl, who's actually quite a high-profile fella. He was the executive secretary of South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission, appointed by Nelson Mandela himself, as I understand it. And he's also a graduate of the World Economic Forum's Young Global Leader Program, right? So this is an organization that has been set up by someone trained by Klaus Schwab et al. I've been following it for a little while. It's a very interesting organization. The reason I headed down there a couple of weeks ago now was because they were running, as part of their cultural program, an event called The Rise of the Far Right and What We Can Do About It, which is basically a big scare session about Trump and some stuff that may or may not be happening in Poland and a whole bunch of other things. And I went down there to record some interviews with some of the attendees, mainly just to find out what the far right is and whether anyone could define it for me. Turns out no one really could. And also no one presenting was able to define what it was. And I've written about that on my Substack, RiseUK.substack.com. You can go and check that film out. But as I was making that film, I started digging into the Conduit a little bit more to understand who they are and what they're about. And they're really like a catalyst for transformation. That's how they describe themselves on their website. They bring together three things: capital, community, and content. Yes, that's money, people, and ideas in order to affect and to catalyze transformational change. Yes, this is the recipe for how you systemically reshape British society, yes, because it's based in London, but also I think that this is a key global conduit for World Economic Forum policy into the global NGO, consultant, corporate, political classes who use London as one of their main international hubs. And obviously this is an extraordinarily expensive elite organisation. It's $2,000 a year to be a member. It's a £350 upfront membership fee. But that is the way with these things, right? These people don't really seem to sense the irony in their own positions, their own activities. Now, if we could just get that last slide back up quickly, because there's something on the right-hand side I just want to refer to. So as well as being a catalyst for change, they're also a proud partner of London Climate Action Week. That's happening in June. As you might be able to tell from that logo, it's very tightly linked to the SDGs. You can see all the little 17 segments of the SDGs in the centre of London there. And that is also a big event on the Goals House calendar. So they run a Goals House, Broad Communication run a Goals House at London Climate Action Week. Now, the Climate Action Week itself is run by this organisation, right? And it's called E3G. And they're an independent think tank. They call themselves world-leading strategists on the political economy of climate change, dedicated to achieving a safe climate for all. They call themselves independent, but obviously that means that they're funded by open societies, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, Children's Investment Fund, Chatham House are funding them, Department for International Development, UK Government Department, Bristol City Council, who I talked about last week, Right, so they're not really independent at all. They're backed by these people, the philanthropic and political entities that are pushing these globalist agendas. Interesting crop of people. I mean, they've got a lot of employees and been going for about 18 years now. So I'm just going to point to three people in particular that really jumped out at me. The first one is Nick Maybe, who's the owner and founder of E3G, which runs London Climate Action Week. So he set it up nearly 18 years ago now. And before that, he was an advisor to number 10 and number 10 to Tony Blair when he was Prime Minister, and almost certainly would have worked with Lord Gould in that capacity, who I mentioned earlier. They actually left at the same time, interestingly. Left number 10 at the same time. Also, Lucy Yu, this is a fascinating young woman. She's a non-exec of E3G. She's also the chief executive of the Centre for Net Zero, which is part of Octopus Group, a sort of an emergent and ascendant group of companies crossing energy, finance, a whole bunch of other areas. She's the chief executive. She's also on 3CI. She's an advisor to 3CI, the organisation that I mentioned earlier as it relates to Georgia Gould, and I spoke about last week. She's currently an advisor to the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. And she's also an advisor to the Connected Places Catapult, which is an accelerator for getting smart city technology out into the UK, right? So she sits at the nexus of a whole bunch of organisations, right? And her background is as an academic, writing policy statements for central government. Really, really interesting individual, Lucy Yu. We'll talk about her more as time goes along. I'm sure she sits right in the middle of a bunch of things here. But then really fascinatingly, this was a great one to come across. I love just finding these sort of things lying around, is Sandrine Dixon de Clèves, who's an associate of E3G, and who is also the president of the Club of Rome. Right, so this organisation we've gone from the Conduit to London Climate Action Week to E3G, straight to the Club of Rome. Right, she's obviously in there to represent the interests of these sorts of people. People watching the column will be familiar with the Club of Rome. It's a think tank set up in the late 60s that brings together global political and corporate players from, Bill Gates to David Rockefeller to Bill Clinton to Kofi Annan and a whole bunch of others. You can see Al Gore's on there, who we spoke about earlier. And they sit right in the nexus of this global public-private partnership model, right? And this is a phenomenal piece of work produced by Ian Davis, with some help, I believe, from Richard D. Hall as well, actually, which I didn't even know until today came from UK Column, or from the group of people surrounding UK Column. Right, I saw this when it came out a couple of years ago. I was like, this is fantastic. How helpful. And it shows all the different layers in the public-private partnership model, from policymakers at the top down to the policy subjects at the bottom, which is us, the hoi polloi in the pit down below. And we've just been through those two organisations, the Conduit and E3G. Essentially, if you just click on, we can see there. No, they've come up. It's fine. Basically, we are covering, just through those two organisations, huge swathes of the global public-private partnership ecosystem. You've got the World Economic Forum in there, the Club of Rome, Chatham House, the Rockefellers, the UN, the philanthropists, national governments, the policy propagandists, E3G, and the Conduit and London Climate Action Week are right in the thick of all of it.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Ben. Thank you very much. Now, I just want to end the program today with the wonderful Tobias Ellwood, because many of you will know that a couple of days ago, his home was invaded by some disgraceful protesters